All right. We are live.
Awesome.
Cool. If you're in one of the Facebook groups that James and I have, and you want us to answer any of your questions, make sure that you allow StreamYard to.
Yeah. That way we're
So
not
yeah,
guessing who you
Facebook
are.
Live. Yeah, doesn't show your names unless you allow it in the Facebook groups. But if you're not on regular Facebook, then it should be able to pick up your name. Or on Instagram, we can see that too. Um, and we're going to check some comments. All right, so welcome to the Mr. Rent to Own Homes show. My name is Dominic Danino, aka Mr. Rent to Own Homes. And today, our topic is going to be does our rent to own program also work for real estate agents trying to purchase their own home, right? So most agents that work with us know that we help their buyers that can't qualify for traditional financing get into a home, and agents get paid a commission for doing that, right? But they may not know that it also can help them. So I am joined by James Brown, real estate investor, real estate agent in Colorado. So welcome, James. How you doing, buddy?
I'm great. This is a good topic.
Absolutely, right? So especially for the times, and I think agents in general understand why this is helpful to them, right? Because, well, you can speak to it. So I'll let you take it over from here. So if I came to you, if I'm an agent, I came to you and said, "Hey, James, does this work for me too as an agent, or is this only going to be for clients?" Right? What would you say to that?
100%. A buyer's a buyer, right? Agents are buyers. And I'll use a case study. But, as agents, we're self-employed. Lenders don't like us. Or they like us. They like our money. They like to do loans. But they put some restrictions on us because we're self-employed, like any self-employed person. So the first deal we actually did with
Wait. Hold that thought.
yeah
I'm a lender, and I like you, James. I don't know what are you talking about.
well yeah do you want to talk before I jump into it about
No. I was just joking,
I
right?
was a joke,
Yeah,
right?
I know. I know you're. I was just joking about it.
Yeah.
But the traditional lenders don't like the variable income aspect of being a commissioned individual,
Yeah.
right? That the non-traditional lenders want inside the box. I call it, consistent, verifiable, and repeatable income week to week and month to month, and that's just not the reality for agents or any entrepreneur or independent contractor or some brokers like me, right? Or real estate investors like us,
Yeah.
right? So traditional lenders don't like that aspect. So that's why when James says, "Hey, lenders don't like agents," well, no, I like James just fine, and other agents just fine. Is that the lending aspect requires some sense of verifiable, predictable income, and that's just not the nature of the industry.
Yeah. As a lender, you've got all these check boxes, and self-employed don't necessarily hit all those, at least not right away, right? Typically, you have to have that track record, 2 years with good income, enough to pay for their mortgage or their rent, right? So, so I'll jump into a case study with our first deal. This was not in Colorado, it was out of state, but had an agent. He didn't have full 2 years as an agent, but he was, getting traction. He just needed more time. It was really cool. He actually picked out a duplex. Normally, we're just looking at single family homes. In this case, though, yeah, he picked out a duplex. He lived on one side, rented out the other side. Did that for, it was about 1.5 years until he was able to get a loan. He had money up front so he could get into the program, and he was able to get a loan in about 1.5 years. And he actually walked into quite a bit of equity and was able to also at the same time go buy a single family home and then turn that duplex into a rental. So within 1.5 years, all of a sudden he's a homeowner and he's got a rental with 2 sources of income.
Or what some others would call a house hack, right?
Yeah.
Lives in one unit, renting out the other, and help him pay for the property, right? So yeah, so that's combining a couple of strategies here, right? Not just rent to own when you can't even qualify on your own, and now you're attacking on a house hack strategy, where if you get a multifamily potentially, hey, you can have tenants pay for your rent, and you're sort of kind of like arbitraging that, the term, where it's like, hey, you're collecting payments. So say my payment is, I don't know, 3,000, but I'm collecting 1,500. Well, in reality, I'm only paying 1,500 net, right, and out of pocket. So that may be less than what a payment on a single family or even an apartment, for that matter, depending on your location. So that's house hack, right? So yeah. So did the agent or this individual buyer here, did they say, hey, I'm looking at this duplex, can you help me? Or did you say, hey, we have this duplex here in our back pocket, this is the one you're going to get?
Yeah, he asked if we could do that, and then he went and picked it out. So it was just on the MLS.
So you don't have a bunch of houses laying around and say, hey, you get one of these 3?
Nope, get to pick any property on the MLS. Yeah.
That's right. That's the beauty of our program, that you get to pick the house, right? We don't really carry inventory. We don't, want to have a couple of, and I call junky houses, because there are some strategies out there, or some people that sort of like Joe Schmo investor that has a couple of houses, say, yeah, I'll let you do a seller finance or make me payments, rent to own. They use the moniker rent to own, and but you get to pick one of these 2 here that I got, and that's it, right? There's a potential problem with that. I don't know if you want to touch on that, but it's a potential problem with that. I think our method, the beauty of our method is they get to pick the house, right? Yeah. So they can't come back later on and say, hey, you gave me one of these 2 junky houses that you gave me and nothing works, and there's a leak, and the plumbing is wrong, and the roof is leaking, and all this other stuff, right? That tends to happen in those other methods, other programs. So for us is we're buying on market on the MLS, like a traditional sale. Is has to pass inspection. It's gonna require an appraisal, right? So it has to be in move-in condition. It may not be HGTV condition, right? But it's gotta be move-in condition, that would also require financing from a lender, right? So It can't be a C5 or a C6 condition as we know it in the lender space. Yeah. So they picked out the house. So could you what was the price point on this duplex?
Gosh, it's been a couple of years. 400,000, something like that. It was in Minnesota, so you don't find a duplex in Colorado or Phoenix probably for that.
Yeah. So we could probably talk about that, right? So just because you're in Colorado and I'm in Arizona doesn't mean we don't do them in other states as well, right? Yep. There's a certain amount of states that we do them because there's some nuance involved with contracts and so forth. But if somebody was in a market where we're currently not operating in, it would just, for me, it would probably take about 45 days to kind of get it up and running, because there's some nuance from a contract standpoint, just a legal standpoint and so forth, just to make sure that we're on the up and up, right? We want to maintain ourselves in the best possible light. I'm A+ rated with the BBBs, plus I'm also licensed, so I'm not jeopardizing my license just to do something that's half baked, right? And you're a licensed agent, and you don't want to jeopardize your license as well.
Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, I would like to point out too, there's other companies out there that do different things, but they only stick with single family. We're more flexible, a duplex. That's not in their box. So if you
Yeah.
wanted to do a house hack on a duplex, yeah, we could do that.
Yeah, and I want to qualify that too, right? Because generally we want to buy a property, or we're going to be okay with a property that can get exit financing at the end.
Right.
Right? It requires for it to get exit financing at the end, because we don't want the person that doesn't qualify, our basically our client, to be making payments to us for 30 years. That's not the program. This isn't a forever payment plan, right? This is for a period of time until they can get their own financing while fixing up whatever's keeping them from getting financing today.
Yep.
Right? So that financing is going to require their exit financing. A lender, a traditional lender or a traditional bank, is going to want to verify the collateral that they're going to be lending on in the future, or when they get their own financing, right? So it still has to meet criteria, right? So there are certain types of properties. I think we talked about. Well, let me qualify the ones that I don't do. Is mobile homes. We don't do mobile homes. We don't do mobile homes on rent to own. Condos. I don't do condos on rent to own, right? Because there's some nuance with those, right? So if you're an agent or a lender, you understand that topic. Maybe the general consumer doesn't understand why, right? But condos, when you think of condos, you think of HOAs, and everybody around the country that's dealt with the HOA or knows, or heard or seen in the news all the issues with HOAs, right, out there, that adds a layer of risk, because HOAs are finicky. They don't like this. They don't like that. Well, no, you can't rent it to them. No, there's too many investors. No, you have to do this. So we try to avoid those situations. We want to keep it simple, and we want to set up the person to succeed, meaning to get their financing. Because if we get to the end and they can't get their financing, we didn't help them, right? We set them up to fail because we knew ahead of time, hey, condo ain't gonna work, or it's a mobile home from the 1950s, right? There's nobody that's lending on that. They're never gonna get financing for that, right? So we set them up to fail with it, knowing, right? So I like to sleep at night. I have a clean conscience and say, hey, I know these rules, and that's why I use my lender hat to know the rules, so that way we know on the exit, is this gonna be financeable? If it is, great. If it's not, I'm shying away from it. That's not a property they want to do. The other one is rural properties, right? You've had some experience with the rural properties, right? I generally stay away from those. But if I can find out, hey, is this financeable either under a conventional or FHA, VA, or maybe USDA, then potentially, right? But generally, usually what you end up having is, if it's site-built house, right? It's a regular house we see out in the country, okay, potentially, right? But sometimes when people say, oh, it's out in the boonies somewhere, and it's just a lot with somebody just put a trailer on it, right? It's not even a fix, and it doesn't even have water or electricity or something, or they gotta port water from it, or it doesn't even have a well, or septic, and all these other things, right? These are challenges from a financing standpoint. So we want to keep it simple. We want to generally stay within a metro, right? A general metro, for me anyways, from a risk standpoint and from a financing standpoint. It's just there's just more there's more available comps too, right?
Yeah.
There's more available comps in a metro than they are out in the boonies, because when they're out in the boonies, people do whatever they want. I don't know, they park a million cars, then they got tractors and all this stuff, and then maybe they're growing whatever stuff they're growing, right? So so you can't compare, you can't find good comparables, right? So anyways, you want to speak to your experience with rural properties?
Yeah. We've done it. It's, some of the challenges were the price point. The price point was kind of on the edge of where mobile home manufactured homes were. And that's mostly what you find like in this area. because it doesn't have like there's no Home Depot. It's just cheaper just to put manufactured mobile homes up. We had to deal with inspections on water testing, the septic. It had natural gas or propane. There was 2 pieces of property that should have been merged prior to it. We had to write up separate contracts and have the buyer merge those later. It was also a for sale by owner property. So I had to deal with that seller. Luckily, we got another agent to help push that transaction through. And it was stick built. So, but in that price range where most people want, it was in the 200s, under 300, which is cheap in Colorado, so our selection was very limited. They were getting gobbled up real quick. That's why we actually had started with that FSBO, got frustrated and just said, we'll find something else, and ended up coming back to it because we didn't have many options, and it turned out great. Yeah, it was challenging. So I get why rural is for us and other companies is kind of like a no-go.
Yeah, absolutely.
But we did it. Like, we got it done.
Yeah, there's an additional layer of risk there, right? But obviously, I always say when there's typically something I don't do, if somebody brings it up and say, well, maybe we can take it on a case by case basis, right? It could be property specific. It could be client specific, right? Well, what is their I would say there's always people can do anything at just about any price, right? You know what I mean? I mean, so it's like, how much risk is it for us, right? Are they going to put more skin in the game than the minimum? Okay, potentially we can take a little bit more risk, because when it gets to financing, right? When it gets to traditional financing, they apply the same rules. Like, hey, more down payment, the lower the LTV, as they call it, the better the pricing, the less restrictions they're going to be, the more flexible they're going to be, and right, because it lowers the risk.
Yeah.
Lowers the risk.
Well, I could talk about, or can I jump back in?
Yeah, go ahead.
So with that deal, for one, it was rural, so that was more risk, because if we get it back, we've got a rural property that doesn't have a big buyer pool, blah, blah, blah. So we were looking at that, and they didn't have jobs. They were moving from the Denver area to this rural area, hours away. So they didn't have jobs lined up. The wife had something she could do virtually. The husband didn't have anything. But we looked at their situation. He was a contractor, like he had skills in the trades, which is very transferable. So we thought, well, he can go find a job. If he's willing to work, he can find a job. So that was a risk, but a calculated one that, we took into consideration. And so looking at all that, we were like, well, normally we would like to kind of start at 10% of the purchase price that they pay up front. They were okay and had the funds to put down 15%. So that made us feel more comfortable.
Yeah, so good point, right? So I always say, well, what's the situation, right? It's like when somebody tries to bring me something that's outside of our general criteria. Okay, well, tell me about it. Tell me more. Like, well, why should we do this, right? Why should we do this? It's the same approach that I take as a lender, right? And whenever you're presenting a borrower profile is, right? Sometimes, there's the terms that we use in the traditional lending space, compensating factors, right? What compensates for the additional risk, right? Do they have additional reserves in the bank? They have 6 months reserves. So if they can't make a payment, they have the reserves to be able to make the payment, and things like that. The type of employment is it, right? So is it a job that's flexible. Like, so, okay, so they have, let's just say, a nurse, right? Okay, these days, I mean, if you're a nurse, you can get a job at just anywhere, right? There's high demand, right?
Yeah.
Versus another I don't know, profession. So I always say, hey, if it's outside the general, things that we're looking at is, why should we do this, right? What's good about it? What's making up for the additional risk?
Yeah.
But let me circle back to your duplex
Yeah.
realtor, right? So they bought a duplex when they couldn't qualify traditional financing. The reason they couldn't qualify is because they were self-employed or they were aged less than 2 years, right? So they hadn't filed 2 years of tax returns reflecting their realtor income,
Yep.
right? What were they doing before that?
I don't know.
All right, let's just say they were an engineer and they left their engineering job to become an agent. I don't know why you do that, but some people may question that. Okay. but let's just say they did that, right? So you can't use the previous history of employment because that's just a total different occupation and industry, right? So lenders want to see consistent, predictable, reliable income. So now that you change types of jobs and industries, well, they want to see enough timeline to say, okay, we can see a pattern here, enough of a timeline to go ahead and substantiate that, yeah, you legitimately can make this much, right? So these are people that we help, right? The other types is people that are getting relocated. So people get relocated and say, hey, I live in Colorado and I'm getting moved to Texas. Okay, but no, it was, I don't know, an accountant. I was an engineer and I'm going to be an accountant or some other form of change in jobs or change in job companies, right? Not everybody gets relocated with the same employer, right? And sometimes it could be the same employer, but maybe the different function. Okay, sometimes it's questioned, right? So these are things that come up through traditional lending and or the underwriters for the lenders start asking all these questions, right? They want to make sure that it's predictable. So there's another type of person. So let's circle back on the duplex. So they bought the duplex. They put money down. They made it, and then after, what you say, 18 months or so, that they got their own financing.
Yep.
Yeah. So were able to document their income, their new income as an agent, and they were able to parlay that basically. Hey, I qualify now. I'm already in this house. So they closed on it. They got their own financing on this. Did they get equity out to go buy a new single family, or what did they do? Talk about that.
Yeah. Good question. So, we set up their purchase price in the future, and that's set in stone, right? They have an option to buy at a certain price. Well, the market at the time, this is a couple of years back, was going up way higher than the agreement. So they walked into, I think, 60 grand equity, which gave them a down payment for this other house. So worked out really great with the market going crazy like that, right?
Sure, and that's another aspect of benefit of the program, right? It's potentially they get to participate in the equity increase or upside of the valuation, right? Now everybody thinks, I mean, compare how crazy things were. I don't know that we'll be there again, right? But I mean, that was just not normal. 20 to 25% increases in some markets, right?
Yeah.
But even now, over the last 2 years, if you look at, I don't know what your stats are in your market, but here, I think over the last 12 months, even with rates the way they are, even with total transactions being down, I think our year over year price increases, I think it was like 5.7%.
Yeah.
Right?
Which is
even
Colorado.
in what we consider a flat market, this isn't a flat market. It's just more of a normal market, right? Not the craziness, right? So yeah. What was happening is a lot of people were walking in to a lot of equity by the time they got their own financing. We already agreed upon a price for them to buy the property, and easily they were walking into equity, which is definitely a win-win. And we feel that it has to be a win-win, right? So we're okay with that, right? We're okay with that ahead. We don't change it up. I know there's a couple of other companies, I won't mention their names, but they changed the values. Like, okay, if you buy it for me in this year is this, if you buy it for me this year is that. If you buy it this year, is that right? Uh, we kind of determine based on your situation how long it's going to take you to get financing. And then we're just going to let you know, hey, this is the price, right? Are you good with this? Yes. The payment make sense? Yes. Okay. We're locking in the price for you, right? And that's really the reality is because if you wait a year or two, obviously, if that agent that bought that duplex waited the 18 months or so, that property was going to be gone, obviously, right?
Yep.
And they would have had to pay, right, the higher price, right,
Yep.
that the valuation came in at. So that equity would have been to the seller, not to them.
Yeah. And he might have been priced out of the market, which is
absolutely
problem for everybody, especially in that kind of beginner home price range.
Yeah. So they were able to springboard off of that into another single family. And now you have 2 tenants on that duplex.
Yep.
Yep. Beautiful.
Yep.
Beautiful. I mean, that's a slam dunk, right?
Yeah.
A slam dunk. So yeah, agents, I mean, and I think some of the benefit for agents, right? If you're an agent, one, you know your market, you know the area where you would like to live, right? You're seeing the properties that go on the market, or you should anyways, right? You should know certain neighborhoods backwards and forward, right? Certain zip codes you should know backwards and forward. Oh, that property, oh, that's way overpriced. There's nothing selling like that. Or, oh, that's a good deal, right? Somebody's underpricing it or whatever. You should know certain areas of your market that well that somebody tells you, oh yeah, this is between this street and this street. It's like, oh no, that's too much. Or no, oh that sounds good for that square footage, for that number of bedroom and bathroom count. Do they have a pool? Okay, all right. So you should know some of these markets. So I think agents should have an advantage, or do have an advantage if they're using it to pick out certain properties that are like, oh, that's a good deal, or I feel like there's value there. Why don't I just pick it up?
Yeah.
Right? Now, we know that not every agent is perfect in the sense that are they pricing stuff correctly, right? We know that, right? There's mispricing in the market, right? The question is, how could you, as somebody potentially wanting to buy, use that to your advantage, right? Yeah. Now there may be some reasons, but obviously you have to do your own due diligence, right? Okay, well it's underpriced, but there's a foundation issue or whatever it may be, right? So obviously that comes up, but generally, if you really have a really good pulse on a certain neighborhood or zip code or something along those lines, or a street, and you see something come up that's undervalued or not priced correctly, then I think it creates an opportunity to buy something that that has good value, but potentially maybe you can't qualify right now for whatever reason, right? So then this could be an option for you. So I would say use the insight that you have in your market to your advantage, obviously to your clients, sure, but also for yourself if you understand the market, right? So where's the value here, right?
Yeah. So I was just going to say, so normally we're just buying on the MLS, but as an agent, you may be running across off-market stuff. Well, it could be a huge value to that. So as an example, like right now, I've got an off-market property. It needs a lot of work, maybe not a good fit for rent to own, because ideally they are habitable, you can get a loan on it, move in, not deal with stuff. But you may run across something that doesn't need a ton of work, where we can buy it now for you at a discount, and you can do the work on it if it needs some fixing up. And what's cool, so with eXp Realty, we have what's called eXp exclusives. No other brokerage has this, but we've got a way to, within our brokerage, and every brokerage has a way to have, company listings, but with eXp, it's actually nationwide. So we got 100,000 agents looking at properties. So if you have one that you're trying to sell, you can put it out to this huge pool of buyers. So I've got this listing right now, getting a bunch of agents that are investors and bringing their investors to look at it. But On the flip side, you've got access to buy those, and those aren't on the MLS, so you've got like first choice at those. So that's a huge benefit to having that platform.
Yeah. So let's talk about that. How would that work? Or you brought up off market properties, right? And that's a little bit trickier because generally off market properties are more for fix and flippers, right? Or rehabbers, or if you're gonna do most of the time they're gonna require renovations. They are not retail ready condition.
Yeah.
Right. However, generally, I've seen a few that pop up that are, I call them, granny houses.
Yeah.
Right. Like it's dated. It's dated meaning, okay, it's got certain cabinets that are from the 70s or 80s that are not the modern cabinets that they are today. The kitchen hasn't been updated, right? So I call those granny houses. Meaning somebody's lived in it a long time. They just never really invested into updating it. What people want to buy retail today, right? The HGTV look, right? The marble cabinets, the white shakers, right? All this stuff, right? So that's definitely not what people want to buy. So properties in that condition, you put them on the retail market, a traditional buyer that has a W-2 job that needs financing, that's not somebody that's handy or wants to do that work, isn't going to buy that property, right? If you put that property on the market, generally going to be somebody that understands that it needs to be fixed up, it needs to be updated, it needs to be modernized, or at least get it into a rental property condition if they happen to be an investor, right? However, if somebody that's going to do that, generally they're getting either private money or what we call a hard money loan, a renovation loan, right? That's only for a period of time until it can be fixed up and then retailed out, converted to an HGTV property, basically, right? Yeah. But from time to time, you will see some of these granny houses that would qualify for financing. They're not the prettiest, would qualify for financing. And if you happen to have additional funds or you're handy in that fashion, that has some potential there that, hey, I'll buy it in the condition that it says, I understand that. And I'm going to put what we call sweat equity into it, right? The term is called sweat equity in the lending space, where somebody's a handy, they're going to do their own painting. Maybe they are in the trades, or, if you happen to be an agent and you do some of this stuff, maybe there are some out there, right? Hey, potentially that's a property that you could buy for your own living purposes. How about let's talk about second home or investment properties. How about that?
We can do that too.
Do that too, right? So, yeah, can we do that, right? So now there's a couple of things we have to make sure we want to be clear on, right? Is you will need to get your own financing, and when you get your own financing, if you already own your primary, the location is important, because if you're buying the house next door and you try to get financing, you can't tell the lender, oh yeah, I live in this one, but this new one is going to be my primary now. Generally, they're not going to buy it, right? And generally, if you say, oh, it's a second home, no, right? Because you wouldn't go to a second home, you wouldn't go to a vacation next door, right? That wouldn't be considered a vacation home, right? So it has to make sense, right? Now, could you refinance it as an investment property? Sure. Yeah, they'll make it a rental. That's not a problem. But what are ways that somebody could buy from an investment purposes, right? We've done somebody that says, hey, I don't qualify for a second home on the conventional side, because on the conventional side, if you're going to buy a second home, that payment plus your primary residence payment plus all your other consumer debt is accounted for and you're qualifying. And most people, their income isn't high enough to qualify for two large house payments. It's not no, there's some people out there, but generally The average person doesn't qualify for that. So they don't meet that criteria as a second home, right? So it really has to be an investment property, but maybe they don't have all the 20 or 25% that they need for the investment property, right? So we've done those where somebody says, hey, I want to do Airbnb on that property. Now, this was during the Airbnb craze, right? Where everybody was doing Airbnb at every location, any corner was an Airbnb. It's like, no, that doesn't work anymore, right? Because that 2020 is over. That effect was because of COVID. People going to places that didn't have restrictions, so it drove up the Airbnb demand, right? But it was only a temporary, right? Once the restrictions were lifted in their home states, these people went back home, right? So there's no more demand for the Airbnb that's next to the Circle K, to the pawn shop, to the smoke shop, to whatever, right? That's what people are making Airbnbs into. It's crazy, but that doesn't work. It would have to make sense. Is it in the resort type area, right? Is there demand? Was this area already a second home or resort type area before COVID, right? There's plenty of markets, plenty of locations around the country that were that before COVID, before the Airbnb boom, that are still that and are going to continue to be, because that's just the way they are, right? So yeah, so I know you have some in Colorado, we have some in Arizona, right? So every state generally has one, whether it's near a lake, so body of water, ocean, lake, right? Ski resort areas, golfing areas, stuff like that, right? So getaway locations, right? Generally, or maybe there's a high demand location, like, hey, this property is located near a convention center, right? I know we have that downtown convention centers, places like that. We have some spots like that in Scottsdale. Scottsdale has tightened up the criteria because a ton of people were doing that, right? So now there's a little bit another oversaturation in that market. But anyways, we understand that. We kind of know that game. So that would be potentially a conversation, and obviously case by case generally when we were talking about investors. So what do you think of that?
Yeah, we can get creative. It's got to pencil out and make sense, of course.
Yeah, absolutely, right. There's risk involved for us, right? So we want to make sure that you're set up to succeed and we're set up to succeed too, right? I mean, it has to make sense for both sides, right? That's part of this aspect of what we do. But anyways, let's wrap it up here. Any additional thoughts and conclusion here as to if it works for agents? You gave a great example of one where it was somebody who was able to do that. I talked about a few tips that potentially agents could do because you have an insight onto the market more so than a traditional buyer, right? So not only can we help your clients, right, that don't qualify for traditional finance, but potentially help you too if you think a little bit outside the box, right? It requires a little bit outside the box thinking, right? Your broker isn't necessarily teaching you some of these things. Not generally. Most brokers aren't teaching creative finance or terms or seller finance or lease purchase, lease option rights. But this stuff, for those of you that are scared of it or think it's new, it's not new. This stuff has been around. For us that are a little bit older, right? Or some of your fellow agents that have been around for a long time, they remember the 80s and the 90s, especially the early 80s when the interest rates were super high, right? And a lot of transactions to play it creatively, right? So, yeah, so don't be afraid of it. If you have any questions, reach out to James. So, James, how do they get a hold of you if an agent has a question?
Go to Linktree/partner with James Brown.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you being on, my friend. We'll do the next one next week. See, I got a few interesting topics that we wanna touch upon. All right, everyone. Thank you for joining us. Again, my name is Dominic Nannino, aka Mr. Rent to Own Homes. This is the Mr. Rent to Own Homes show with my guest, James Brown, agent, investor in the Denver market. If you have any questions, you can reach me at Mr. Rent to Own Homes on IG, TikTok, or on YouTube. My information's in my bio as well on Facebook. And if you're a part of one of my Facebook groups, my contact information there as well. Until next time, see you then. Bye-bye.